Welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where everything we talk about is related to helping leaders and their teams build enduring, great businesses. I'm Brad Giles, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Kevin Lawrence. How are you today, Kevin?
You know, Brad, I'm doing awesome. It's been a crazy week, but I'm doing great, and feeling probably the best I've felt in 4 weeks.
Awesome. That's good to hear. I'm a bit the same way. So tell me, what topics do we have today?
Well, we got kind of a couple things. We got some fun stories about some kids getting up to their own innovation, which I think is it's a good laugh there. And then we're talking a little bit about data and different sources of data that we're starting to see come out that are making things interesting and likely helpful to help us make some better decisions. And then we're going to spend a bit of time on, what does it look like getting back to the office or back to the company? Lots of people are still at work working, just although they're at home. But how do we actually start to ramp back up as we start to climb out of this thing?
Yeah. Awesome. So let's get into it. So I heard a couple of interesting stories this week. The first, and both of them were about kids who have been homeschooled or working from home via Zoom and other educational apps on, say, the App Store. So the first one came out of Wuhan, when Wuhan in China was in the lockdown. And what the kids there did is they figured out that if the app that runs the educational component of their schooling remotely, if enough of the kids voted that a 1 out of 5 on the App Store, automatically the App Store would close down that app. So they all got together in secret and they all voted at 1, and then it all shut down. And the teachers didn't know what was happening, and they needed to go back to Apple and they needed to figure it all out. So that was a really interesting first story about kids.
I love it. I love that spirit, the innovation. Brad, it kind of reminds me a little bit. When I was in college, there was a bunch of us, and we had a teacher who we didn't like. And the average grade was a fail on the exams. And I remember, we lobbied almost like good old manual labor. We lobbied to actually get her fired, right? And we rose together, did that. But today, these kids are way smarter than we are. They would somehow hack some technology like that, and maybe eliminate their posting at the school or something. I don't know. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm amazed by the ingenuity of people and how they can leverage technology. It's so different than how when I grew up.
Well, they're digital natives. Here's the second story,
Yes.
right? Very quickly. 10-year-old kid, story that I heard about recently, and the school teacher's using Zoom, and the parent walks in and she says, "What are you doing playing with the dog? Why aren't you doing your schoolwork with the school teacher on the Zoom app with the rest of your classmates?" And then she figured out that what this 10-year-old did is she recorded herself paying attention, just watching the screen and paying attention and nodding. She recorded that, and then she plugged that into Zoom so that when the teacher looked at the class of, say, 30 students, she was there looking like she was paying attention. And then so she set it up so that she could just go and do what she wanted. It was a classic.
It's awesome. I absolutely love. I hope that the companies I work with don't figure that one out, because it's critical. Like we're using it. We got a screen full of people when we're doing our strat planning sessions, and or even our other meetings. But we're able to watch and see who's paying attention, and you can see the typical email face, right? They get the stone face. They're like, they're not listening. They're doing their email or reading something else. But most of that again, the ingenuity, and for me, it's that kind of innovative thinking that is going to make some amazing companies and some amazing improvements to businesses coming out of this. So we need to have people like that on our teams.
Innovation will see us through. And I think also the internet, the way that the internet is being used now, it's being used kind of in an internet first manner. We're seeing a lot of companies who've had a strong internet presence already are soaring ahead, and others who perhaps have been not really invested in the internet, they're really suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can see that. And some companies moving very quickly, which we can probably talk about at another time. Some analog companies becoming digital in a matter of a week or two, which has been exciting to watch.
Yeah.
So the next thing that we're going to get to here today is an article I read on the weekend from the New York Times about how they're able to start tracking how people are changing their spending patterns. So, and we mentioned up front, looking for different sources of data. And so this was an article in the New York Times called How Contravirus Has Changed the Way Americans Spend Their Money. And what they did is they were able to use credit card records and debit card records to go and track spending in different categories. And it's fascinating. And they put together beautiful infographics to help you to understand it. But for everyone's trying to get a sense of what's going to happen, that's pretty fresh data, right? Within the last, up to a couple of weeks ago, pretty fresh data to see how patterns have changed. So that's going to be helpful. And there's a number of other ones, Brad. Other ones you wanted to share with as well?
Just before I do, what was really interesting about that New York Times article is you look at when the first lockdown, I think, was California, clearly US data, right? But the first lockdown was in California, and that was late March. But you can see the spending patterns, because it's coming from credit card data, the spending patterns beginning to skew maybe 10 or 12 days before that. The really important thing is that, sure, the legislators acted, but well before that, the people acted. The people changed their spending patterns based on what they were seeing. We saw that through, the bulk purchase of toilet paper or people raiding the shops or whatever they were doing. But it's really interesting that as we look towards what's coming out, it's going to be people's behaviors that really drive it, because it was people's behaviors that drove it going in, right?
Exactly. And there's some particularly interesting data. I mean, there's things you would expect. Like movie theaters are down 100%. Entertainment spending down 75%. Sporting goods spending down 60-ish%. But it also shows what's going up. Ebooks were up about 8 to 10%. News media, similar. Music streaming up about 25%. Video streaming up 40%. And gaming up almost 75 or 80% over the base they already had. And some of those businesses already had a lot of spend going on there. So it was fascinating and real facts of how the dollars are being put out there in a different way. The other one that we discovered was about utility and power usage. And again, that's a KPI or an indicator I never thought about, but power consumption, being an indicator of what is going on. And you can see by this other article, and that was, I think it might have been New York Times as well.
It was the New York Times. Yeah,
yes.
You showed it to me.
That's right. Thank you. And just being able to see the patterns. So again, those are two, they may or may not relate to your business. The key is what real data sources can you get? Because the opinion sources are infinite. Right. But those are sometimes harder to make real solid business decisions on. Yes, it's your best guess, and we need to make best guesses. But what other data would really indicate what's going on and help you understand where the demand is or where the demand's going to be?
It's so interesting you say that, because as I look through my social networks and the people that I kind of follow, you can really see different patterns in where people are getting their news from. So there are different opinions. You said there's lots of opinions. There are different opinions, and we've come out of an environment which is so politicized around different edges of a spectrum. And there are people, I guess, commentators who are trying very hard to maintain some kind of position. And therefore, on their platforms, they're advocating a certain position, be it whatever it might be. But it's really interesting to see how people how many people get their information from these opinions, and then what happens with that? How does that change the way that they're conducting their lives? Because there is no substitutes for actual data. The problem with actual data, of course, is it can be manipulated. You can have different graphs
easily
and things. But we've got to find, I guess, as leaders, we've got to find many different paths to substantiate the data that we're making our decisions on. And that's the really hard point.
Yeah, and it's like with data. I mean, I started my career in research, and it's about unpacking the data and realizing the source and the bias, because almost all data has a bias. And it's almost like the political spectrum, right? You can look at any particular issue you want, and it can go all the way from the right to the left. And there's all these views in between. And interestingly, every view in between, there is data points to support it. You can read one day that eggs are amazing for you and one day that they're not amazing for you, right? And if you look behind the studies, usually there's a reason why those opinions come out, and that's okay. We just need to be aware that there is a spectrum of opinions with data to support those opinions, so we can have a wider view of it and realize, like you talked about, sometimes these people, you actually have such a narrow-minded view of an issue, you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
And that's why I love to get data from lots of different places, because in the past I got caught up in that. I would think I had a reasonable global view of something, but really I was actually in a little micro slice. I think that's kind of what you're getting to there, Brad.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'd say in the last week, certainly in Australia, there's a sense that people are beginning to look beyond. People are beginning to think, okay, so at some point we'll get out of this, and what happens from here? And we kind of touched on that in our last and first episode, but it's really interesting to see how the dialogue has changed. For example, in Australia this week, the Prime Minister said, if everything continues the way it is, we could in 4 weeks be in a position where we're reducing the restrictions, where we're beginning to lift some of the restrictions. International travel still a long way away, but travel within your area, maybe it might be possible. So as we think about that, how do we begin to think about that as strategic planners, as people who work in this space with organizations? What are we beginning to sense that companies need to be doing, looking beyond, as we move forward?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this week I've been working with a client through this, and they actually want to be leaders in their field to show the way to get back to work, to be a role model for doing it. And we're still a little early, but like everything, like preparation is what's required. Like you don't want to wait till the government announces it and then try and scramble. So, for example, in this company, belief being that probably some phased back to work is sometime in the next month to 2 months, right? Realistically, and there's lots of different views about when that could be. But in this particular company, and they're really progressive, driven people who really deeply care about their people. They're starting by making it clear. This is not just about the economics of the business. It's about being a role model in the community, as I mentioned. So we laid out, and we were laying out, what are our plans to get back to work? So people are working, but to get back to the office. And first of all, recognizing it's likely a phased approach. That's their view, and mine as well, that it's a phased approach. It's not going to be everyone back to your stations. It's going to be phased. Well, interesting, we got into it. The biggest thing that I am seeing is the psychological shift, because we're kind of warm and safe in our cocoons, and you got to step out into the big bad world. Some people might have to take like public transit again. If you take transit, to get to your office, you're gonna have to get close to other humans. And so as we discussed this, it was fascinating, Brad, because as we were discussing this, I'm watching senior executives, and some of them are a little tense about the conversation. And at one point I'm saying, who wants to go back to the office? And everyone's kind of, no, I don't know. And some are saying, I'm comfortable as long as there's no one around. Some are saying, hey, fascinating point. A guy I really respect in this one organization, he's like, hey, as long as I know the cleaners haven't been in the building for 3 days, and I get to clean my own office, and nobody else comes in my office. A senior executive, a vice president of a company saying, I want to clean my own office. But what he's really saying is, and I get it, is, I want to do my work. I have a young family, and I want to take good care of my family. I don't want to be taking anything home. I don't know the standards of the cleaning company, and I don't trust the standards of the cleaning company. So I, as a senior executive, would rather clean my own office. And so what was interesting is we spent a few hours on this, and as we went through it and discussed it, finally there was debates. And what I ended up leading the conversation, I said to him, hey, what do you, and we had, 13 people on the screen, what do you need to be comfortable for you to come back to work? Because we were talking about everyone else. So I wanted to flush out their anxieties and their concerns. Man, we made a big list. Like every person had 2, 3, 4, 5 things they needed in order to be comfortable back in the office. And we have a spectacular list. So what they're doing is they're compiling it. Yep. They're going to share with their teams the intent of the company to be a leader in this, never forcing anyone to come back to the office anytime soon if they don't feel safe or it's not right for them during this transition time. And then go do that same exercise with the teams. What do you need in order to feel safe and be able to make this happen? And then once even it's all happening on a regular basis, still going and getting feedback on a regular basis, because it's all about people feeling safe. Yeah. So I know I got kind of excited with that one, Brad, but it was fascinating to watch the tension and the awkwardness about it. And then once they flushed out all their needs, everyone kind of chilled about it.
These are the questions that we've got to have. I mean, your book was about, to a degree, mental health was a really big issue in your book. And, you know, people have been hit hard economically, physically, people they might know, the fear that's in the community, like all of these things create mental health issues. And, you know, we need to be really conscious of that. I'll bet that all of those 13 perspectives on that call were probably different. It would have been very hard to draw a single thread because everyone's got their own situation. And you can't
one person said, I don't have young kids or elderly parents that I regularly interact with. So I'm actually not overly concerned. But somebody else had elderly family members they're seeing every week and they didn't want to have to stop. And they had anxiety about, well, if I'm at the office around people, I have a greater chance of catching something. And I don't want to, I don't want to, feel the guilt of transferring it to somebody I love.
And you can't say that either of those situations are wrong. Everyone's got their own circumstances and their own situation. I think we've just got to look to support people in that situation. But then I guess it begs the question, are people actually going to want to go back to work? Are people they're going to be like, to use your phrase, the cocoon, they're going to be like, well, I'm actually pretty happy being at home and I get to pat the dog.
I get to see my kids.
Yeah, I don't have to travel an hour to work.
Yeah.
So how are we going to deal with that?
That's where leadership comes in, Brad.
Yeah.
Our job as leaders is to have a vision and help people to march towards that. It is a leadership job. And like number one in this case is to get people safe.
Yeah.
Right. That is there. And then you need to role model it. Yeah. Right. And then you've got to gradually kind of rebuild the trust with the environment, because in many ways we've broken the trust with our environment, and we got to rebuild it. And that is a somewhat slow process. That's why this company is starting it now. Like we're starting it right now. And being prepared for any time between 2 and 22 weeks that we will be able to use that preparation.
Yeah. I guess being adaptable, being agile, if you've got a meeting room at the office that has 8 seats at it, is it possible that 2 or 3 or 4 of those people could be working from home for a week, a month, a year? Being adaptable and agile. And that really comes back to, are you a decent leader? Are you empowering people? And are you working on their KPIs? And that's interesting because I think that there are KPIs that are going to be quite important to think about now before we go back to work, in terms of how do we measure, what are the things to measure in the business? What are the things to measure that we're doing in the business, and the other components that need to be measured now? Any thoughts on KPIs as we begin to look beyond the lockdown?
Yeah, that's a great question, Brad. That's a very, very good question. Many of the companies that we work with have quite clear KPIs. There obviously will be new KPIs around health and wellness. Organizations would have a safety culture that are more industrial, construction, manufacturing type things.
Yeah.
And that's really strong in some of those businesses. And this health part of the health and safety is going to be big. And it's
Yeah.
going to be about, temperature scans. It's going to be about issues reported. Like there's going to be a number of, but that's more just to manage this part of the business. But I think you're also talking more operational or job focused KPIs. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, well, I'm talking broadly. I mean, I think if you think about, I guess it's coming at it from two angles. Number one is protecting our people's safety, like you said. So that could be around temperature checks. It could be around infections. It could be around some of the perhaps leading indicators that are going to help to stabilize our economics as a company as we move forward. But then maybe how has our longer term strategy changed, say 3 years, in the midst of this crisis, if at all, and how do we maintain some kind of continuance towards the strategy that we're trying to develop?
Yeah, and a couple ones that I am already really starting to pay attention to and talk to people about are customer visits, customer conversations. Well, visits not yet, but customer conversations, and either or conversations through salespeople or whatever source of firsthand data we have about the demand side of our business. And so I think in the companies that I work with, that is going to be massive. The other one is going to be respectfully looking at performance of people through this transition. Because there's some people that have not done well, and some have. So just looking, maybe we need to make some adjustments, change the roles of people through the transition. Then the other one is something around the mental health piece, because that's a passion of mine, and I know it's something you really care about as well. And the follow to the repercussions of this somehow. One of my clients is got a measure that is related to brain function and has a side door into mental health, mostly the improvement of mental health treatments. That is the next phase that they're going to be looking at. But how can we gauge the mental health of our people? Because pretty likely over this next year, 18 months, there's going to be a higher level of stress and a little more weirdness.
Yeah,
absolutely. And just knowing that our people are mentally healthy and strong is something else that's a little more hard to measure, but that's one I think people will be paying attention to.
Well, I think we can say with some confidence it will be a stressful time. I think we can say with some confidence that there's going to be some real challenges in the next year for organizations and for the individuals within those, for all of the reasons that we know. And that's only going to put more pressure on the people in the organization. I mean, maybe it could come back to something as simple as an employee net promoter score, and then just having a single measure for the organization that we can track, because simple numbers are better numbers often, right?
Absolutely.
What's happening to our ENPS?
Yeah, and probably some measure of the percentage of time people want to work in the office versus working at home. Working at home could be the new version of being sick. I'm going to work at home today, and could be. It depends on the culture and the kinds of people, but that's a potential of people not wanting to be in the office.
Yeah, productivity is such a big issue right now. I mean, we see. I don't know about through your clients, but what I'm definitely seeing in my clients is there are managers who are realizing that their people who are working from home are probably doing almost nothing, and they don't really have the tools or the know-how to deal with that. Now, my instinct is go to the daily huddle every day, or even twice a day. What are you working on today? What did you do yesterday? How's that align with our priorities for the quarter? All of this simple sort of stuff that you and I talk about all the time.
The challenge is that you can fake a bit of that, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting in all, I mean, probably having 20 hours a week with CEOs and executives on Zoom, like in his last 4 weeks, maybe 15 would be 15 to 20. But watching and seeing people's work environments and what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Like I've trained myself. I've worked from home for 25 years on a regular basis. I do not get interrupted. I do not have things distracting me. I've learned how to create an environment to focus and produce at home. Most people aren't even close. Man,
Yeah.
there's kids everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And because you get to see people, a lot of people would be very, very underproductive. Very, because it's a special discipline to do that.
I ran a strategic planning meeting with the leadership team, and there was a person on there during the call. And clearly you've got, I don't know, 7 videos running. And this person, for a good part of the day, was interacting with her toddlers. I'm not casting blame on her. I'm not saying that was the bad thing. It's probably the situation that she was in. But yeah, if that's what happens when she's on a call with the leadership team,
Just
what's
imagine
happening outside of that? Yeah. Yeah.
It's true. So, and again, it's like no harm, no foul. We understand what's going on in people's homes. Just the funniest thing, there's one company I was with, and one of the leaders was having problems with the computer. And so she yells, IT. And her husband comes in with the 2 kids and starts fixing stuff. So there is an upside to it, right? There is other support and things that can happen. But it'll be very interesting to see how it changes. And last point on it, I was just on the phone with a friend tonight on the way back here, and he's in the office furniture business. And a couple things that they're starting to hear a little bit of is and I'm hearing a bit of, is demand for these things called the old cubicle dividers again. Everyone went to these open spaces, and it's cool and clean and open. But when you cough, you're coughing on someone.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's going to happen or not. It'd be really interesting to see in the work environment if it does get back to those dividers again. If I was to make a bet, I would bet that it will.
I agree. But let's go even a little bit further. In the last month, all over the world, organizations have changed and become so adept or so capable of running remote meetings like this. So is it actually possible that a huge number of people will work from home in the future? A lot more.
But be careful. How adept have they become? I'm hearing feedback from a lot of people. Some people are having decent meetings, some good, and some atrocious. So I think a lot of it depends on the company and the culture and how they function through this technology. I
know that you ran. I interrupt you on purpose there. I know that you ran a strategic planning workshop over the last 2 days with a client. Okay, yep. That was one of the first that you've done of that style. Or I know you've been running them for a long time, but we spoke before about it's getting better. Like your ability over the last 2 days to run a remote meeting has gotten better. And then I'm sure the next one will get better, as have mine. Yes. So I definitely know, but executives and leaders and managers and even workers all over the world who have the ability to work from home, let's be fair, are getting better at it every day, every time they do it, a little bit better. So are we actually going to want to go back to that? And I think like, you might have a ping pong table as a employee benefit at the moment. Well, maybe working from home is going to become more of an employee benefit in the future.
Oh, I tell you what, it's an interesting space to watch, and to see how it works for sure. And because I know for a lot of people, they will look for a way, because it's in many ways people have talked about telecommuting and it's how it's silly to take airplanes everywhere when you could do a video conference, right? Yeah. And so, video-based meetings have been growing probably, I would say 1 or 2% a year, something like that. Not real data. It's just popped up, 100% or more than, straight up. It's not going to come back down for sure. There are going to be many meetings that will replace, like as you and I have chatted, but our intent as a company is to make our virtual strategic planning meetings as or more effective than when we're face-to-face and fly people in from around the country.
Yeah.
And I know that we're really, really close. You could argue that we maybe could be there, but let's just say we're close.
Yeah.
At a notable less cost for travel, but the downside of not building the social bonds, which is incredibly important with the companies that we work with. And many will still do that because they want the social bonds with the team. They do. But so I think in many ways, there's been a nice growth, and same with a bunch of online purchases, things, online businesses. It's going to go straight up. and then it'll adjust in, but it won't go back to where it was.
Yeah. All right. So any other items for discussion today, Kevin?
That's pretty good, Brad. I think,
good?
you know what I mean? If we're really looking at it, there's some people that are innovating like heck in this, and I'm sure we'll get some more great stories. I love the stories of those kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, just some fascinating sources of data, as we talked about with, you know, just looking at the credit card records and the debit card records and power usage. You know, I'm sure we'll hear lots more.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I'm getting excited about kind of getting back a little bit more to back to the new version of the normal. You know,
Me too.
And like many companies, and the key, like everything, is preparation. So that's a bit of a recap of what we talked about, but I think we had pretty good
All
conversation there.
No, I agree. Good to chat. So thanks for listening, everyone. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Brad Giles, and this is Kevin Lawrence. If you'd like to find the video, you'll be able to find that on YouTube, or obviously we're on Apple and Spotify and a whole range of podcasting platforms. If you'd like to find Kevin, you can find him at lawrenceandco.com. Correct. And you can find me at evolutionpartners.com. So thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Brad. That was fun.
Yeah. Enjoy, and we look forward to next week. Take care.